Everybody knows that the US funds and supports Israel to the tune of $3 to $4 billion a year and $17.9 billion since October 7th. Well, at least now you know. But do you know why? Why did Joe Biden say in 1986 that
Israel's the best $3 billion investment we made? If Israel didn't exist, the US would have to invent in Israel to protect our interests in the region.
Well, one answer is that the US loves military bases, so much so that they have 750 of them around the world. Israel is basically a nation-sized US military base. I'm only slightly exaggerating. Alexander M. Haig, Secretary of State under Ronald Reagan, said that
Israel is the largest American aircraft carrier in the world that cannot be sunk, does not carry even one American soldier, and is located in a critical region for American national security.
I don't actually know what Alexander M. Haig sounded like, so I hope that was accurate.
Incidentally, Reagan himself called Israel a strategic asset and said, "If there were no Israel with that force, we'd have to supply that with our own. So this isn't just altruism on our part. Remember when I secretly sold weapons to Iran to support death squads in Nicaragua?" In addition, the US military keeps a weapons stockpile in Israel worth $4 billion. It's one of only two such stockpiles the US keeps outside of NATO nations, the other one being in South Korea. The WRSAI was established in the 80s in case the US went to war in the Middle East. Right, when has that ever happened? The stockpile is meant for US use, but Israel has been allowed to withdraw equipment from it as well, including since October 7th. On top of this, Israel is the country that has received the most foreign aid from the US overall, over $300 billion when adjusted for inflation. But still we must ask, why? Why does the US put in so much resources in Israel? Well, Henry Kissinger, may he rot in hell, summed up the aims of US policy in the Middle East like this.
To enhance Israel's strategic capacity in the region, consolidate friendly Arab regimes, and to isolate and debilitate the Palestinian movement. I unnecessarily prolonged the Vietnam War so that Richard Nixon could win the 1968 presidential election.
The US was so committed to this that during the 1973 war, when Israel at first got its ass handed to them by Egypt, Syria, and the rest of the Arab coalition, the US airlifted 22,000 tons of military equipment in order to quote Kissinger again,
save Israel from collapse. What we wanted was the most massive Arab defeat possible, so that it would be clear to the Arabs that they would get nowhere with dependence on the Soviets. We sought to break up the Arab United Front.
The last point refers to the Pan-Arabist movement, which sought to unite Arab nations against Western imperialism. It was socialist-ish, at least rhetorically, and that made the West fear growing Soviet influence in the region. The figurehead of Pan-Arabism was Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, and he was too inspirational for the old colonialist powers' liking, especially after 1956 when he nationalized the Suez Canal and made its revenues benefit the Egyptian people instead of Britain and France. So when Nasser suffered a humiliating defeat against Israel in the 1967 war, a loss that dealt a crucial blow to the Pan-Arabist project, the US was eternally grateful, and it's no coincidence that US financial and military aid to Israel really skyrocketed after 1967. This turn of events would help the US deepen its influence in the Middle East by securing more allies in the region, including, tragically, Egypt. It's a similar story with the Palestinian liberation movement, which, following the Kissinger quote above, the US sought to isolate and debilitate. In the Arab world, public, though not elite, support for the Palestinian cause has always been very strong, and so it was important for the US, Israel, and their allies to show that the Palestinians, and popular resistance in general, couldn't win. And so you get the brutal wars in Lebanon against the PLO and then Hezbollah from 1982 to 2000, and again in 2006, and again now. Israel is basically around to threaten the rest of the Arab world into compliance with US interests. This is a role that Israel itself recognized early on. A journalist in Haaretz wrote this already in 1951.
Strengthening Israel helps the Western powers maintain equilibrium and stability in the Middle East. Israel is to become the watchdog. Israel could be relied upon to punish one or several neighboring states whose discourtesy to the West went beyond the bounds of the permissible.
I don't actually know what this Haaretz journalist in 1951 sounded like, so I hope that was accurate.
Israel and the whole Zionist project have always depended on imperial support. Before partnering with the US, France was Israel's main patron. You can merci beaucoup them for the fact that Israel has nuclear weapons. And before the French, it was the British. Theodor Herzl, the ideological father of Zionism, wrote in 1896 that
Europe would have to guarantee our existence.
he imagined Israel as an extension of Europe, writing that
There in Palestine we shall be a sector of the wall of Europe against Asia. We shall serve as the outpost of civilization against barbarism.
I don't know what Theodor Herzl actually sounded like, and I don't care.
Still, why does the US, Europe, the West, if you will, care so much about the Middle East? What's the reason for all this imperialist and colonialist meddling? Well, there are 710 reasons why. Actually, there's one reason why. The Middle East has the biggest oil reserves in the world. Perhaps it's reductive to say that this is all about oil, but oil matters a great deal. Middle Eastern oil motivated the British to support the Zionist project in the first place. It also motivated the US to seek control in the region following World War II, to the extent that in 1953 the CIA staged a coup against the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh, when he wanted to nationalize the country's oil resources. The US later made it official policy through the Carter Doctrine in 1980 that they would go to war with anyone threatening their oil interests in the region. Going back to that central year of 1948 for a moment, according to Andreas Malm,
When the top echelons of the US empire discussed where to throw in their lot with the Zionists during the Nakba, they had oil interests foremost in mind. No silly voice here because I actually respect Andreas Malm.
oil is, of course, the fuel of global capitalism and of the military-industrial complex. Indeed, the US military is the biggest institutional consumer of oil, using more oil and thus causing more greenhouse gas emissions than over 100 countries combined. The US has staked its very currency on the stability of the global oil trade through the petrodollar. All this is why oil is such a strategically important resource, as well as a reason for the US's insistent support for Israel, its handy little nation-sized military base and watchdog. Oil also just so happens to be one of the key things boiling the planet and thus threatening to make huge parts of the world uninhabitable. And so, Israel's occupation and genocide of the Palestinians is deeply implicated in the climate crisis. As the title of Andreas Malm's essay I quoted above goes, "The destruction of Palestine is the destruction of the earth." Hugely recommended essay, by the way. You could even say that climate breakdown threatens to turn much of the world into some sort of Gaza. As Colombian President Gustavo Petro said during last year's COP meeting, "The unleashing of genocide and barbarism on the Palestinian people is what awaits the exodus of the peoples of the South unleashed by the climate crisis. What we are seeing in Gaza is a rehearsal of the future." So, with Israel, there's a lot more at stake than just the fate of the Palestinians. What's also at stake is the military-industrial complex, America's global hegemony, peace in the Arab world, the climate crisis, the liberation of oppressed people everywhere. It's all connected. So the fact that many people, such as Ilan Pape, are predicting the collapse of Israel and the Zionist project in the near future, that's a huge goddamn deal. If the collapse of Israel is possible, who knows what else is? Who knows what will then become possible? As Hill Akid says in the essay collection From the River to the Sea, which you can get for free as an ebook from Verso and Haymarket, Palestine transcends Palestine. Palestine is a portal, and the countless Palestinian futures which beckon on different horizons are also, in a sense, possible futures for all of us. Free Palestine.
Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video interesting and you would like to learn more about this topic, I can highly recommend an episode of Upstream called Oil, Monopoly, Capitalism, and Imperialism with Adam Hanieh. My video was just the barest scratching of the surface on a very, very large topic. So if you want a wider context, then definitely check out that. I would also like to share a couple of fundraisers that you can support. One for Bisan and Mohammed's family, and another for Yaha's family. I would greatly appreciate it if you supported them. Finally, thank you to my patrons, Stachan, Haruna, and the others. That's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.